Assalamu alaikum. Do I need this mic?
Yeah.
I do? Okay. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Oh, yes, okay. So we'll get started right away. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, and to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance, and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. Okay. So first, I just wanted to seek your forgiveness for teaching the Sunday class. Alhamdulillah. I know that normally we have my husband do it, or Shaykh Fuad al-Gohri also do it. But given that the topic is about the best generation and the generation of the Sahaba, today we're going to do a session that is about the female Sahabiyat, and that is going to be, inshallah, my focus. And I felt that I don't think that even as I discuss their stories, that I will not be doing them justice. And it's very hard to do the lives of any of this generation justice, because just to go through one life should actually take us more than 1 hour. If we were to reflect on, the life of Ammar radiallahu anhu, they made an entire movie series about it. And we are going to select, I wanted to choose certain names that we happen to know less about. So I'm actually not going to talk about the Ummahat al-Mu'minin. They're obviously the best of the best women, the wives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But I'm going to look at other Sahabiyat who had very different roles, but all of them important and all of them honored by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they have these virtues that both men and women in their time admired, honored, and that whether you're female or male, we can benefit from. And so they are the best generation. And when you read their stories, I try to think about, like, okay, what would a modern case like this look like? And if you were to just take any one of their stories and try to come up with sort of like a modern replica of what that would look like, we would all say this person's crazy. We would all say this person, like, crazy in a good way. Like, they're just, who does that, right? And that's, subhanAllah, these women in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that they did the things that they did. It also shows that once they knew who Allah was, and once they knew who the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was, their devotion to this reality of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah was liberating. It gave them power. It gave them a superpower to do and be people that today we study and learn about and reflect on. And so I want to say that this is something that whether you're a woman or a man, young or old, we can be inspired by how the strength of their conviction just allowed them to do things that were amazing. In their time, it's amazing for us to reflect on. The book I'm actually going to use, I wanted to use something that was written by a woman, and there's a text that just literally came out right before Ramadan started. Like, I had my name on the, when you pre-order something? So my name was on the pre-order, and then alhamdulillah, it came in the mail like right as Ramadan rolled in. And this is not just from a woman who did this research, but it's from a local woman who did this research. And Dr. Haifa Yunus, who is the female resident scholar at ICOI, she's actually the one who compiled this book. It's called Builders of a Nation. And you can order it from Amazon. And mashallah, she did a really beautiful job. And what the biographies are short, like they're not the lengthy ones that you can maybe get in some of the Arabic texts. But what I really appreciate about how she compiled these is she has reflections and she brings in details that a woman notices. So there's ways that these things are written about in textbooks, but then she draws our attention to pay attention to this, think about this. And alhamdulillah, you know, in Islam, we do have, some people say, well, we don't have, or we're anti-patriarchy. Or we're anti this, we're anti that. I'm like, actually, Islam has patriarchy and matriarchy. It has both. There's the patron and there's also the matron. And we have these great male father figures in Islamic history. And then we also have these great female mother figures in Islamic history who were very powerful women, very strong in their own right. And it was, if you look at the way that they were seen in their own time, in their own society, some of the, you know, like the ways that we have understood gender in the West, they are not a reflection of our religion. They're really a reflection of, you know, the context that we live in. So there's much to say about gender in general, maybe at a different time. But today, inshallah, we're just going to dive into the lives of these beautiful and amazing women. And so the first biography that I wanted to look at, and I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get through because of time. I will try to get through as much as I can. But the first one that I wanted to talk about was Sulaym bint Milhan, also known as Rumaysa bint Milhan. And maybe you guys are familiar with her already. Dr. Hifat mentions, there were people in the history of Islam who prioritized their religion and belief above all else, refusing to compromise in the face of adversities. One such personality was Rumaysa bint Milhan, or Sulaym, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the mother of a prominent companion who narrated many hadiths, and one of the 5 women who pledged their allegiance to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Bayt al-Ridwan. Now, before I go on, this is maybe some trivia. Does anyone know the famous son of Rumaysa bint Milhan? Does anyone know who her son is? Okay, as soon as I give you one clue, everyone will know who it is. That's right, Anas ibn Malik, who we named our Anas ibn Malik Community Servants Program is named after her son. And before there was an Anas ibn Malik, there was her mother. There was Rumaysa bint Milhan. And the story of Sayyidah Rumaysa is a story of devotion. One of the things that that is mentioned about her, and I'll try to summarize because I know we can't go through all the details. She is someone who learned directly from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and she had her son learn directly from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and she was very avid about her learning from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. She came from Medina. She lived there with her husband Malik, who was not Muslim. So that's where you get the name Anas ibn Malik, right? It's the name of her husband who was not Muslim. And he's obviously a famous companion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit. Now, she actually became Muslim, and this is something, again, that Dr. Hifat brings our attention to. She became Muslim. She took the Shahada while her husband was on a trip to Syria. And when he returned, he discovers her decision. So here's the first thing to think about. How many women in our time do you know of that would convert to another religion in the absence of her spouse, just because they believe this to be the truth, right? Even if someone is thinking to convert, often what are they going to do? Let me wait till my husband gets back. Let me talk it over with him. Let me see if he's going to agree to this. If he agrees to this, maybe then I'll do it. If he doesn't agree to this, then I'll just follow whatever he's following, right? But what is this, like the very first fact that she hears about Islam, learns about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and embraces Islam. So she's someone who accepts the truth when she sees it. That there's something very important about that. the trust that she had in herself to accept the truth when she witnessed it. She was not reliant on her husband to tell her whether or not she's allowed to witness the truth. She just witnessed it. And by the way, many of the female sahabiyat were like this. This is just one example, but many of them actually have this story. And so he comes back from his trip, and he discovers that she has now become a Muslim, and she is trying to encourage him to become Muslim as well. Now she continues to stay with him, in terms of she doesn't leave her husband at that time, but she puts all of her attention now on her son to raise her son properly, and she wants her son to be a righteous and devout Muslim. So she's teaching him the basics of his deen. She actually tells her husband, don't spoil him. Don't spoil this son of mine, because I want him to be a devoted Muslim. And Sulaim would sit with her son and teach him the Shahada. And again, her son actually became Muslim on her hands. So she's teaching her son about Islam. The son becomes Muslim. Now the husband's even more upset. Like, not only did you convert, but you converted, you made my child also become Muslim. So her husband becomes angry with her, and he tries to get her to stop, beseeching her to the point of like, don't ruin his religion. And Sulaim would respond, I am not ruining his religion. Rather, this is the true religion. And so she tried in her utmost efforts to encourage her husband to become Muslim. It didn't happen. Instead, alhamdulillah, her son Anas ibn Malik did become Muslim and became one of the most trusted companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Her husband did not want to accept Islam, so he decided to leave his wife and child, like abandonment, right? And so because of the fact that they became Muslim, and on his way to Syria, he died. So she was then left as a widow and a single mother at a young age. At that point, she dedicated her life to her son, saying that, like, I'm going to put all my focus in raising him as a righteous Muslim. And she said these beautiful words, I will not wean Anas until he leaves me, like until he weans, and I will not marry until Anas orders me to. And this is like, it's like you could say that there's, did Anas ibn Malik ever order his mother to marry anyone? No, but it's like what she's saying, like, I'm going to just put my focus on him, that was kind of like the flavor of what she was trying to say. Now, after her period, after the waiting period's over, many people actually wanted to marry her. Many people who are Muslim wanted to marry her. Also, people who are not Muslim wanted to marry her. So Abu Talha is one of these people who wanted to marry her. And he was a man of great wealth. He was someone who was considered to come from a great lineage, great tribe. And when he would come to propose, she rejected him. And then he would come to propose again, and she rejected him again. And then there's it's not in this particular biography, I was just reading it earlier today. But essentially he said, like, is it that I don't have enough money? Like, is that why you're saying no to me? And like enough wealth? And she she scoffs at him, she laughs at him, and she goes, that's like not at all what I'm concerned about. And then she actually says, oh, Abu Talha, you are an intelligent man, yet you worship a tree that is carved by a man from the Banu Najjar tribe. And should it be touched by fire, it would burn. Do you not feel ashamed that you worship a tree? By Allah, I do want to marry you, for you are a man of honor and station. But if you accept Islam, I will seek no dowry from you. I will want nothing more. So essentially, she's like, you have all these wonderful traits as a person, but you do this thing that doesn't make any sense. If you become Muslim, then I'll marry you. And so they say that she had the most blessed dowry from the Sahabiyat, which was her dowry, her mahr was that she has to become Muslim. So he does, he goes to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and he learns about the deen and he becomes Muslim. And because he becomes Muslim, she ends up marrying him. And they say that she had the most blessed dowry. And again, every time he approached her with the intention of marriage, she would respond to him by saying, my dowry is that you proclaim that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Now, I want to pause here because I think there's something important here. Sometimes we have community members, right, who might marry someone who is a new convert to the religion, right? And somehow that is like not frowned upon, but maybe it's judged a little bit, right? It's judged. No, but the fact that this was in the time of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu she was praised, and they said no one had a more beautiful dowry than Rumaysa bint Milhan. Her dowry was the Shahada, right? That's not something to judge, because one of the greatest Sahabiyat is someone who actually did this. If anything, it's you can, I'm not saying go and try to like have, do anything haram and dating and all this stuff, and then at the very end be like, okay, now you have to say the shahada, and that's going to be my dowry, and then, we're going to be just like her. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that, that the fact that her dowry was the shahada, and that being something honored, like seen as something really virtuous and great, it means that we should not see it as something low. That's all I'm saying. If it was, it shows that like her intention was this higher, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The specific words of the Ummah at that time, where the Muslim community was, we have never heard of a mahr that was more valuable and precious than that of Sulaym, for she made Islam her mahr. And then she was then given the nickname, the Lady of the Great Dowry, the Lady of the Great Mahr. So another thing I wanted to say is that many of the Sahabiyat, they had nicknames. And these were nicknames that men and women knew them by. So what does that mean? That means they live in a society where people know each other. So it's not just an anonymous crowd of women and an anonymous crowd of men. It's like people actually know the identities of the different people and the biographies of different people in that community. And they, to the extent that they have nicknames, right? Asma bint Abu Bakr, the woman of two waist belts, because of the role she played in the hijrah, right? And so she has this nickname. One of the things that also nicknames in the time of the Sahaba, I think about, is how they honored one another with whatever sacrifices or whatever role they played that was important in the religion, right? And in the support of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu. So it wasn't just about the nickname that you're giving to this person to honor them, but it's by giving the supporters of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu nicknames, you're actually honoring the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu himself, right? And so we can learn from that, alhamdulillah. One of the stories that's really beautiful about her marriage with Abu Talha is that this is, the story in the, we've heard it many times, but anytime I had heard it, I didn't actually have the names of the people in the story, where a man came to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu and he was really hungry, and the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu asked the companions, he said, who can take this man home and feed him, right? And Abu Talha is the one who actually raises his hand and says, I can bring him home. Abu Talha comes home and he asks his wife, he said, so first off, he volunteers it without knowing if there's anything in the pantry. This is a woman's like worst nightmare. It's like, you have guests, so we have nothing in the house. Nowadays we have Instacart, so it's like, just give them tea and coffee until the Instacart arrives, or DoorDash. But what ends up happening is he asks his wife, what do they have? And they actually take all of the food out of their home, everything in their pantry, and they set it up on the floor, like on a place to eat, and they dim the lights. So they have 3 place settings. This person comes in, a companion comes in, and they're eating with him, and I should say they make it look like they're eating with him. He's hungry. And so in the end, what they do is the husband tells his wife, he says, Abu Talha tells Sulaym that the light is a little bit bright. Can you make it dim? Can you put the candle lower? And so she dims the candle, and he says, okay, it's still too bright. Can you dim it? And so she makes it less. And so in the end, there's such little light in the room, and Abu Talha and Sulaym, they just pretend to eat the food. But because it's so dark, you can't tell that they're not eating. They're making the motions, they're doing that. And this is so that their guest who has come, he eats all of the food in their home. And they send their kids, or they send the kids. It's mentioned that Abu Talha had a son already named Zayd ibn Sahel. So like Abu Talha is coming with his son, she has Anas ibn Malik. They send them to bed early, like without food, okay? So first off, there's a sacrifice on their kids. There's a sacrifice on themselves to feed one hungry person that they wanted to feed. So again, if we were to think about that in our time today, someone rings the doorbell, they want food. And can you imagine, alhamdulillah, we live in a place of plenty. We live in America in a place of plenty. But let's just say that there is certain foods only your kids will eat. And those of you who have picky eaters as kids know exactly what I'm talking about. You could have a full fridge full of food, but like they're only gonna eat like 2 items in it, right? You take those 2 items and you give it to the guests and you tell the kids, there's what you wanted is not there. And they're the kind that they're not gonna eat anything else either, even if they're starving. So like you think about that type of sacrifice of you're gonna give the food to the guest and your kids will go to sleep hungry. It's one thing to give when you have extra. It's another thing to give when you're in need of it. It's one thing to sacrifice for yourself. It's a whole other thing for a parent, and in particular a mother, to sacrifice the food of her hungry kids. That goes against the very nature of like the fitrah of a mother. A mother cannot see her kids hungry. It's very hard, Mother cannot see children hungry. It's very, very hard. So it shows a level of mujahada and strength on her part that she is going to sacrifice what she has and give this food and with Abu Talha to this person who came. And also that there's different responses that women can have when something like this happens. So a husband brings home a male guest that is unexpected, and they sacrifice all their food for this male guest. It's very easy for the wife to say, I don't want to do this. Why'd you bring him home? Give him 1/3 of it, then send him away. Give him half of it, then send him away. Get mad at her husband and be like, what are you doing? Like, I didn't sign up for this, right? I didn't sign up for this. This is something women sometimes say. But this is something good, right? So it's like, she welcomes this opportunity to give charity in such a sacrificing way. There's a big lesson in that for us. So not only does she join her husband, she supports him, she plays the part, she dims the candle, she's like fully in on it, you know what I'm saying? And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he tells them, like he asks everyone the next day, like that a great virtue was done last night because Allah actually revealed verses in the Quran about them. Right, and this is one of the tafasir or one of the asbab al-nuzul that's ascribed to the verse وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, and they prefer others over themselves even if they have a great need. So one of the debated asbab al-nuzul that's related to this verse is this particular incident with Abu Talha and Sulaym. There is also the story of when Abu Talha was gone. He was traveling. She had one of his sons, and his son's name was Umar. Now, Umar was constantly ill. And once when Abu Talha was gone on a trip, the son actually passed away while her husband was gone on a trip. Now, when he comes back, she doesn't tell him about it right away. And he asks her about him, like, how's Umar doing? And she says he's quiet. So he doesn't lie. Unfortunately, he's passed away, so he's quiet. But she feeds him a nice meal, everything, and she's taking care of him. And then after she feels that he's totally settled, then she tells him, she asks a question. The way that she introduces it, again, it like shows you kind of like her hikmah and her wisdom. It's not the first thing she brings up. She lets him get settled. She lets him be at home. And then she says, if a tribe gave a tribe something to keep with them for a while, and after a while, the first tribe asked for it back, what would you say? And then he responded, he says, it is there, so they can take it back. So then she says, seek your reward from Allah as he took back what was his. I think these words are words of comfort even today. We think about the kids that are dying in Palestine. Seek your reward from Allah, for as He took back what was His. I mean, these are, words of comfort. And I think they comfort us when we think about, again, some of the tragedy that's occurring. It's outwardly, it's tragedy, but inwardly, these are all shuhada, these are all martyrs going back to the one who owns them in the first place, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She had such a beautiful response to the passing of her own child. In this situation, it said that she was blessed immediately very soon after, with another child. And they were both blessed with another child, Abdullah ibn Abi Talha, who then went on to become one of the great companions. Rumaysa bint Milhan also, she showed great courage, wisdom, and faith. She was not someone who was ever known to complain about the different hardships they faced. And they were never wealthy. They were known to have nothing in the home, but not because they couldn't be wealthy. It's because they were so generous, they were constantly giving everything out. So Abu Talha is the one who was looking one day at his orchard, and he was admiring how the birds, he was praying inside his own, so he owns an orchard, he's praying in his orchard, he's admiring the birds, and while he's praying, and they're singing in the middle of his prayer. And he's thinking, how many birds are there? Is that the voice of 2 or 3 birds? And he finishes prayer, he realizes that he was distracted in his prayer by trying to count the number of birds that were singing in his orchard. So he's again, this is something that it's unfathomable for us today, but he decides, because the birds in his orchard distracted him from Allah in his prayer, he gave the whole orchard away as charity. And he did things like this regularly. So again, they didn't have a lot, but not because they couldn't. It's because they were so generous. They were constantly giving what they had away. Sayyidah Sulaim also, she was known to serve the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as much as she could. So there's also something here for us to pay attention to in terms of the interaction of women in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with the Prophet. He's not just a prophet for the men. He's a prophet for the women too. He's a prophet for all mankind, right? And so everyone in the society wanted to have a close relationship with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in as much as they can, in whichever way, obviously that's allowed. And so her household was one that was devoted to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the service of Islam. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would visit their home, and she would give him a mat to pray on. He would also sometimes go to her home to take his afternoon nap. Okay, so that's how close they were, as like how the Prophet Muhammad felt so comfortable that where are you going to go to take your afternoon nap, right? Like if you think about like friends' homes that you would go to take your afternoon nap, maybe you can only count a handful of people that you feel, maybe there's no one that you would actually take a nap in their house. I don't know. But, and knowing that the Prophet Muhammad is not just taking a nap in a separate room even, it's going to be in a place where everyone can see him, right? Because the nature of the homes. So he would sometimes take his afternoon nap in their house. Now, this is an account that is, I want to say this is a sound report. It is, and every time you read her biography, and whichever, in Arabic, English, whatever text you read it, this story is always mentioned. He would take an afternoon nap in their house, and as he slept, she would take the perspiration from his forehead and collect it. So she has like a cloth, right? She's not touching him, but the droplets of sweat that's on his forehead, she's like dabbing it with the cloth. Okay. Why do you think she's doing that? What was that? For the barakah, for the blessing. There's an understanding that everything about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is blessed, even his sweat. They said that his sweat didn't smell like human sweat, it smelled like musk. It was like etr, it was a perfume. And that it was in and of itself blessed. On one occasion, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ woke up from his nap, he asked, Sulaim, what are you doing? And she replied, I am taking these drops as a means of barakah from you. Okay, and he did not prevent her from taking that. He did not prevent her from doing that. Now, this is a prophet of God. I don't recommend someone takes a nap in your house and you just go and say, maybe there's barakah, don't do that. But it's to show you though that like the women in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they felt like they understood the spiritual significance of who he was as a prophet. You could say his khususiyya surpassed his bashariyya. Does that make sense? Like his spiritual reality was more prominent for them than his human qualities. They didn't just see him as just another human being. Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik narrated also another incident that shows the extent of his mother's love for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. On an occasion, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ entered the house of Anas ibn Malik while his mother was present, and he saw a leather bag that contained water. The Prophet ﷺ saw this leather bag contains water, and he drinks from it until all of it was finished. At this moment, Sayyidah Sulaim, she did something fascinating, again, that demonstrates just how highly the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ revered the Prophet and sought his blessing. She took the leather bag, cut off the part of it that from where he drank, and she kept it as a source of blessing, as a source of barakah. How did male companions do this with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? They actually did very similar things. It was mentioned about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that when he was making wudu, that the male companions try to catch the water that's falling from his hands in the wudu. And that's why it was said, I think at that time it was, forgetting the name of he becomes Muslim later on, but at the time that he's witnessing this, he's not Muslim. Suhail ibn, I don't want to say the wrong name. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. But he's the negotiator for the Quraysh. That's what I thought, but I don't want to say it. He said Suhail ibn Amr. So he witnesses this, and he actually tells the king of Byzantium, he tells this also to Abu Sufyan, that I've seen things about this man that I've never seen in like anyone else. And essentially that his companions love him in a way that I've never seen anyone love their leader. And what he gives as an example is when he makes wudu, when he washes himself, they rush to gather the water that is leaving his blessed hands as a source of blessing. So Rumaysa bint Milhan was not to miss out on these kinds of things. And so she also would collect what she could from the blessings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. When she sends her son Anas ibn Malik to be a servant of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, at the time that Anas ibn Malik goes to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to serve him, he's only 10 years old. So, and people are coming to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, giving him different presents and gifts and different kinds of wealth. And she actually tells him that I don't have this kind of wealth. And she says, "O Messenger of Allah, people give you gifts, and I am giving you my son as a gift. Let him serve you and learn from you." And she actually says, my son as Khuwaidim, like your little servant, Anas. Like he's not big. Let him let him help you in whatever way he can. And so she's, again, this idea of she doesn't have much, but what's the most treasured thing of any mother is going to be her own kids. There's nothing that's more treasured to a mother. Assalamu alaikum. MashaAllah. So subhanAllah, like to give your son away, but she's giving him, and she's honored, she's happy to do this because it's the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the service of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So her home is a home where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would take naps, which means it's a place that he would seek comfort. Her husband was actually accompanied the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Abu Talha, on all the major expeditions, and her son would serve the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself. And when Anas ibn Malik talks about serving the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says that the Prophet ﷺ never once asked him, "Why did you do this? And why did you not do that?" And that's like, that's an amazing thing for us to think about. That's really like, if you think about like, how does someone do something like that? Where someone is serving you, they're going to make mistakes. He would tell Anas ibn Malik, "Please do this," like in the present tense. But he would not say, "Why did you not do this right?" Or "Why did you do this wrong?" Right? This questioning of like, why about something in the past he did not do. Does anyone here have any thoughts on what a hikmah from that may be when it comes to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Maybe from people who come to Tuesday's tafsir class, and I'll give you guys a little hint for those who come to Tuesday's tafsir class. You know how Imam Ibn Ajib, he talks about like different levels of like virtues? I want you to think about this in the context. I'm giving it away, but it's okay. In the context of the divine decree. When it came to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how is this way that he would behave with Anas ibn Malik related to our belief in the divine decree? Yes. What was by the will of Allah? Yes. And Ayan?
That is, the quality he has. Allah said he has his quality. So in turn, this is a quality that he has.
MashaAllah. So both of them are right. So and it's kind of like you looked at it at an angle that I didn't even look at it, but like Allah has described the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with certain qualities. So that those qualities which Allah has described the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with is part of the divine decree. So that's why he is like that. He's a fulfillment of God, of the divine decree. But I think you were talking about something else. Yes. If Anas messed up, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam understood that as being part of the divine decree. So for him to ask Anas, why did you or why did you not? Because he's a prophet again. So he's the level at which he's interacting with all of creation is he's interacting actually with God. And then the creation, right? So for him to say, why did you or did you not? It's a form in his context as a prophet of complaining about God's divine decree. Because if something has happened as a prophet, he has certainty that whatever has occurred is in the past is necessarily the divine decree of God, and that it is the best possible thing that could have happened, right? So, again, nothing in the realm of possibility is better than what was. So to ask a person, why did you do this? Why did you do that? For us, it's like you're just thinking about the asbab. You're just thinking about like cause and effect. But the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu his heart is like is connected to al-Nusaybah, the cause of all causes. So he has actually contentment because his contentment is actually with God. So then contentment with God means contentment with the divine decree, contentment with Anas ibn Malik and all of his mistakes as he is a fulfillment of different things. Okay, alhamdulillah, I'm glad 2 people from the tafsir class, you guys got it. That makes me really happy. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. She was also known to be someone who was both brave and knowledgeable. She was someone who was courageous and did not bow down in fear. She had some qualities. I feel like they were Amari qualities. Do you guys know what I'm talking about when I say Amari qualities? Amr was a particular archetype from the companions of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Do you guys, the 4 temperaments? How many people are familiar with the different temperaments? Yeah, so Amr was choleric, right? And it's described that he was choleric if you read his biography. So sometimes you find a more choleric manifestation in Rumaysa bint Milhan. And this is one story that's like that. So it was said that on the day of the Battle of Hunain, and this took place after Fatah Mecca, she went out with the Muslims holding a dagger. And when her husband, Abu Talha, saw her, he told the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he said, look at what she has with her. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ smiled because he knew that she was a woman of courage and wisdom. And he asked her what she intended to do with the dagger. And she replied to him that if any disbeliever claimed close to her, she would kill him. And then she said to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, O Messenger of Allah, kill all those people who do not believe in Allah, or who believed because, or who simply believed because we conquered Mecca. To this, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ responded and said, Allah is more than enough for us, and He has showered us with excellence, thereby explaining that He did not need to kill these people to establish the truth. But it was out of her extreme love for Allah and loyalty to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that she was like ready to go to battle for the truth. And you we sometimes find these stories in I say it's Umari because Umar, one of the like questions that comes up when you read Umar's story is like a man comes to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he says something disrespectful, and Umar comes up to the Prophet and says, should we kill him? The Prophet is like, no, we don't do that. But he's like ready, he's so ready for the truth, like to do whatever is necessary. And so this is kind of like a manifestation where the Prophet comes teaching her again, no, we don't need to kill them. Allah has favored us and given us, his, specifically he says that Allah is more than enough for us, like, in terms of establishing the truth. She was also known as being because of how much, so this is something that's subhanAllah amazing, is that people who are dedicated to service, and in particular the khidmah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, khidmah gave them proximity to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, greater proximity. So Anas ibn Malik, he was devoted to the service of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, so he is actually one of the 7 major narrators, mukthirin al-hadith, right? We get like that from the companions, there's 7 that narrated the most, he's one of them. And so she, in her household also, because her household was one that was dedicated to the service of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, she was also known to be a woman who was knowledgeable, and she had deep insight. So an example of this is actually there was a question about Hajj, and so so it says Sayyidina Abdullah bin Abbas, who was a famous companion of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, was in Hajj with a group of people from Medina. The people asked him about a woman who got her menses after performing Tawaf al-Ifada. They wanted to know if she could leave Mecca or stay until Hajj ended. So after Tawaf al-Ifada, there's also Safa and Marwa, and there's drinking water, and there's praying in Maqam Ibrahim. So they said, can she just leave at this point, or does she have to stay until all the rites are done? So Abdullah bin Abbas told them that they could leave, but he insisted. He said, but check this answer. When you go to Medina, confirm whether or not what we said is correct with Sulaym, with Rumaysa bint Milhan, because she is a specialist on this matter. And when they came to Medina, she confirmed that the opinion that he presented was correct, as she heard it herself from Sophia, Sayyidah Sophia, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So she was, again, her intention is to be of service to the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Because that's her intention, she has proximity. Because she has proximity, she's able to learn all of these things about the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then be a source of an authoritative source for the Muslims after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's also a big deal that someone like Abdullah bin Abbas, that we all know as a very famous companion, says, check this opinion with her, right? So reason why I think that's significant for our time today is that the virtues of like the Sahabiyat were known, and their authoritativeness in certain matters were known, and that a male companion could see a female Sahabiya as being superior to him in knowledge in a particular matter and say, this is what I think it is, but make sure with her. There's an adab in that I think is important for us to reflect on today. Sayyidah Sulaym was also keen on learning and gaining knowledge about sensitive matters of religion and did not shy away from asking questions. And again, this is, she asked a question that, like, even Sayyidah Aisha is like, why did you ask that question? And she asked it from the Prophet Muhammad directly. But the Prophet Muhammad actually praised her. And because her intention in asking that question is seeking the truth. It's a question that is an embarrassing question to ask. Knowing in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, he's the only one who can know the right answer to that question. There's like no one else you can go to get the answer. There's no women. In our time, alhamdulillah, there's embarrassing questions. You can ask women that question. You don't have to ask it in a mixed setting. But just to give you an idea of the nature of the question, she once asked a question that caused discomfort and like people were actually awed. They're like, how could you ask that? And she said, what should a woman do if her dream mirrors that of a man, ultimately leading to ritual impurity? So Sayyidah Aisha, she said, she was present at that time and she felt uncomfortable. And she actually said, this type of question is humiliating for women. But the Prophet Muhammad in his wisdom and kindness actually addressed her, and he answered the question, and he told her that if a woman experiences this, she should do the same ritual bath that a man does who experiences this. And again, this does not take away from her. This is actually a reflection of the fact that the truth was so important to her that it didn't matter what people thought of her. She's going to find out what's right for her religion. Sayyidah Sulaym also was a woman her dedication was just known. Her courage was known in the community. the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself said, I saw myself in a dream entering paradise, and behold, I saw Rumaysa, Abu Talha's wife. And that's narrated in Bukhari, right? So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is describing this about her and her, basically she's one of the people promised paradise. She's from the women, Sahabiyat, where we always talk about the 10 promised paradise, right? These are men, male Sahabis. There are also female Sahabiyat who are promised paradise, and she's one of them. She passed away at a very young age. So all of this that we are talking about her, because when I first heard about the female Sahabiya who's like picking up droplets of from the forehead of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I remember thinking maybe she was an old lady. Because I just thought that's such a close, like, who does that, you know? But in reality, subhanAllah, she passed away at the young age of 40 during the Khilafah of Muawiyah. During the Khilafah of Muawiyah. And it also reminds us that, like, even if a life is short, like her life is not a long life, 40 years old. Maybe many people here might be older than that age, that she lived a very potent life, a life that we still remember today, through her and also through her son, Anas ibn Malik. And I know I only have like 15 minutes left. When does my husband normally end at iftar, or like 5 minutes before iftar? I just wonder what he does. You guys know? Anybody? Okay. I was hoping to cover more than I'm getting to, but we'll see. The next Sahabiya that I wanted to talk about, and I don't think we'll get to everything, is Nusaybah bint Ka'b. And she's also a really amazing woman, Sahabiya, in the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Now, most people recognize her by her courage on the battlefield. Right, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ described her, and he admired her courage. And on the day of Uhud, he said, "I did not turn right or left in the battle, except that I saw her fighting for me." It's an amazing, amazing person, subhanAllah. Now, I'm going to say that arguably, it's not the fact that she fought for him, although risking her life is a major, for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and seeking to protect him is obviously a huge virtue. But what you find, the thread that connects everything that she does, is how much she loved the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Like, she really loves the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And you will see this in everything. She was also known as Amara. She was from an elite tribe. She was born and raised in Medina, and from the Khazraj tribe. She's considered like someone who's played a major role in the early Islamic history. Now, one of the reasons, like they said, that the Sahaba, they all had certain qualities that were in common. Among them, they had patience. Among them, courage. Amongst them, sincerity. Amongst them, dedication to faith. But some of the ones that we like hear their names more and more, it was always because they like kind of they had that more than others, right? So everyone has these qualities, but some people just like shined above and beyond. And so she's one of these figures that shined above and beyond. She becomes Muslim before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ migrated to Medina, and she was one of the 2 women. So in the second pledge of Al-Aqaba, 2 women take this pledge. They take the bay'ah with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And she's one of these 2 women who travel with the male companions to meet the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in Al-Aqaba and take the bay'ah with him, take the pledge. Now there's a really, if you know, the second pledge is different than the first pledge. The terms of the second pledge are different than the terms of the first pledge. Does anyone know what the major difference is between the 2 pledges? Okay, so I'm just going to read. I'll read one and I'll read the second. I'll ask you to observe what you notice to be different, okay? So in the first pledge, they say, "We will not worship anyone but Allah. We will not steal. Neither will we commit adultery, nor kill our children. We will not utter slander, intentionally forging falsehood, and we will not disobey you in any just matter." Okay? The Prophet Muhammad's response to this is, he says, "He who carries it out, Allah will reward him. And he who neglects anything and is afflicted in this world, it may prove redemption for him in the hereafter. And if the sin remains hidden from the eyes of men and no grief comes to him, then his affair is with Allah. He may forgive him or he may not. That's the first pledge of Al-Aqaba. So the second pledge is a little bit different. I'm going to read that one to you. The second pledge the Prophet Muhammad and one of the Ansar asked the Prophet Muhammad about the principles on which the pledge is going to be. And the Prophet Muhammad said, to listen and obey in all sets of circumstances, to spend in plenty as well as in scarcity, to enjoin good and forbid evil. In the service of Allah, you will fear the blame of no one. To defend me, the Prophet, in case I seek your help, and to protect me from anything you protect yourself, your spouses, and your children from. And he says, and if you observe these principles, paradise is in store for you. So now, hearing the first pledge and hearing the second pledge, what do you notice as a difference between the two pledges?
The second one includes the pledge you have.
The second one does include, yes, like I am going to do whatever it takes to protect you and to serve this cause. But the thing is, the second pledge could not have taken place. It could not have happened without the first pledge. You can say that the first pledge is a pledge that we are going to try to practice Islam. We are going to practice this religion personally. We're not going to commit these sins. We're going to do the halal. We're going to stay away from the haram. Right? That's what the first pledge is about. I'm going to practice this faith in as best as way I can. And the second pledge is not I'm going to practice Islam. It's above that. I'm like the first one's like I'm going to live Islam. I'm going to live this religion. The second one is I'm going to live for this religion. This is my purpose. Is supporting you and your mission and your way. That's a big pledge. So Nusaybah bint is someone who took the second pledge. She's ready for the battlefield from this point on. She's ready to sacrifice. She's ready to give. And again, can you be someone? This is also a really important lesson for our community. Can you be someone who lives for something that you don't live by? Right? It's part of what prepares us. If we want to be someone who can live for something, then we should strive sincerely to live by it first, so that like there's an authenticity for us living for it, and a strength also, and a blessing in living for that. I'm just looking at the time, and I am trying not to go over time. So, Sayyidah Nusaybah was known for her courage. She was on the battlefield, and in the Battle of Uhud, when some of the Muslims, the archers, they left where they were, then the enemy army started to attack the Muslim army. Sayyidah Nusaybah, when she was there, she was taking care of the wounded, but then she saw the Prophet Muhammad had been left unattended. So she immediately jumped to protect him. And she started bravely fighting. It said that she received 12 wounds that day as she fought to protect the Prophet Muhammad. Her son Abdullah was fighting with her, and he was struck by a sword. She came to him, wrapped his wound, and after she wrapped his wound, she told him to go back and continue fighting. The Prophet Muhammad, in the middle of all this, he actually saw this, and he saw her encouraging her son to continue fighting, despite being severely wounded. And again, mothers, imagine your son wounded, right? You would you're like, okay, you're wounded, go away. Like, go, you can't fight anymore, go seek protection. She wraps his wound and says, keep going, keep fighting. That's something right there. And despite being severely wounded. And then the Prophet Muhammad sees this, and he tells her, he says, who can do what you did, O Amara? Right? Who can, in another narration, who can have the courage that you have? Who has your kind of courage? So what you notice also in the Prophet Muhammad, like she loves the Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad loves her as well. The Prophet Muhammad admired her courage, and he said, I did not turn right or left in the battle except that I saw her fighting for me. Later on, it said that she confronted the person. She remembered who slayed her, or who had wounded her son, and she went out and found him on the battlefield and she killed him. So it's like, Mama Bear, you know? It's like, you did that? Okay. I won't forget. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would actually pray for her abundantly and her family in the battle. And he, addressing her son, he said, addressing her son Abdullah, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, "May Allah bless you, O people of this home. Your mother's place is greater than the place of so-and-so." And then he said, "May Allah have mercy on you, O people of this home. Your father's place is greater than the place of so-and-so." Now, alhamdulillah, the hadith does not say who so-and-so is. If I was so-and-so, I'd want to die. But if you are Nusaybah, or if you are Abdullah, or if you are her husband, like the Prophet ﷺ is saying, like, you know, this is how valuable, this is how worthy you are to me, is that your place is higher than maybe people that you might think are higher than you, but no, because of your devotion, you have a really high rank. And then the thing that, again, when I say that Sayyidah Nusaybah, the thing that we should really know her for is how much she loved the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Out of all the things in this world that she could have ever asked him to pray for, the thing that she actually would ask the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, like, please pray for this. And this, again, is a sign of her integrity and her purity, is that she said, "In al-akhirah, I want your companionship. I want my family to be companions with you in the final abode." And so then the Prophet Muhammad supplicated for her family to be his companions in paradise. She's one of the women that actually is a reason for wahi to be revealed. Again, all of her actions, if you understand them through the lens of mahabba, of love, you understand them. She will be on the battlefield to risk her life. She's going to send her son out to risk his life. She's going to kill the person who hurt her son. But like, it's min bab al-mahabba. She asked for the eternal companionship in the garden with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And she also, when she hears about the different good deeds, she actually complains and the rewards of different good deeds. She complains to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and she says, the men are taking away all the rewards. And this is because in the Quran, right, some of the things that people today say, so that the plural form, even though it's known in the plural form in Arabic includes men and women, right? She would hear this masculine plural, and she said, the men are taking all the rewards. The men are taking all the rewards. And most of the rewards that are mentioned in the Quran are about men. So she says, what about us women? When she asked that question, Allah reveals this verse in Surah Al-Ahzab, إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما. Surely the Muslim men and Muslim women, the believing men and believing women, the devout men and devout women, the truthful men and truthful women, the patient men and patient women, the humble men and humble women, the charitable men and charitable women, the fasting men and fasting women, the men and women who guard their chastity, the men and women who remember Allah often, for them Allah has prepared forgiveness and a great reward. And it was this question that allowed then all of the other Sahabiyat to realize every time the plural masculine is mentioned about a virtue, it applies to women as well. You're also getting the reward. You're not missing out. So alhamdulillah, we can as women today, we can be grateful to her that she actually made this complaint and that Allah is the one who responded to her complaint, right? About like, what about us? She also participated in Fath Mecca and the Battle of Yamama after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ passed away. She was known as a warrior and an inspiration. And this is just a short summary of her life and her courage and her selflessness. And it does not cover the detail, like there are many more details in her life. It's 6:55. What time is Maghrib? I want to give us time to make dua. 7. What was that? 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Okay, let's see if we can get not a whole bio in, but maybe a partial bio. Let me get something that's a little bit shorter. Okay. Okay, I'll mention just a couple details. There's this woman in the from the Sahabiyat, her name was Sharik. Okay, Sharik. And it's interesting because much of her life is largely unknown to us. What we do know, however, is also a beautiful example. She is a companion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the details of her name and lineage and tribe and background are debated. But many people thought that she was from the tribe of Daws. Ibn Abbas narrated that Sayyidah Sharik converted to Islam during the early days of Mecca while she was still married to Abu al-Askar al-Dawsi, who was not Muslim. And again, this is something that Dr. Haifat mentions, and I really appreciate this. She says, this brave decision to accept Islam, despite her husband's opposition, highlights her courage, critical thinking, and ability to challenge the notion of inherited tradition. She did not passively accept the religion of her ancestors, but instead chose the truth with careful analysis, emphasizing the great importance of seeking knowledge and developing insight in matters of faith. Now, what I really wanted to share about her in the short time we have is that she accepts Islam and then she dedicates herself to being a secret caller. So she goes into the homes of the women of Quraysh and she tries to convince them to become Muslim. So she's a da'iyah, calling people to Islam. And she would tell them stories about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. She would tell them the narrations that he knew from the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So she is also a narrator of hadith. And essentially, the Quraysh, they find out that she's like affecting the hearts of the wives in the community of the Quraysh, because now they're interested in Islam. They're like, why are you interested in Islam? They talk to this, all signs point to this particular woman who's coming and visiting them and telling them. And so her own tribe, well, actually, they take her and they return her to her tribe. They abducted her, actually, and they threatened her and they forcefully returned her to her tribe. So it's mentioned that, and she says this about what they did to her. Okay, just this is only because she's making da'wah. There's no battlefield in her story. She's a caller. They carried me on a camel without a saddle and left me for 3 days without water or food. Whenever they stopped somewhere to rest, they would sit under the shade and leave me in the sun. That was the case until I felt something cold on my chest. So I reached for it and found out that it was a vessel of water. I drank a little bit from it, but it was taken from me and lifted. Then it came back and I drank from it. But then it was lifted. Then it came back and I drank from it. But then it was lifted several times. Then it came back and I drank from it until I was quenched. Then I poured the rest of it on my body and clothes. When they woke me up, they saw the traces of water and saw that I looked better. Consequently, they said to me, you were unchained, so did you take our water and drink from it? I said, no, by Allah, what happened was this and this. They said, indeed, if you are truthful, then your religion is better than our religion. So they looked for their water and found that it was just as they had left it. None of their own water was missing. When they saw this miracle, they realized a miracle had happened to her, that they had oppressed an innocent person and Allah had provided her with the water and Allah had protected her and Allah had provided her that many times. Then her tribe embraced Islam there and then. The water was a form of divine provision sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a reminder that Allah's help is always present for those who strive for his sake. So she was blessed with this like beautiful karama. And it's not a karama that just gave her relief. It's a karama that when it happened to her, her tribe took it as a sign. What was her niyyah? What was her niyyah the whole time? Let me call people to Islam. Let me convince them to become Muslim, right? That's what her niyyah was. How does Allah help her with her niyyah? Giving her this miracle. When her tribe sees the miracle, without her saying become Muslim, they become Muslim because that was the blessing from that Allah had given them. She was also a significant narrator of hadith. She, in particular, now I think this is also interesting because she's like, if you can give her a title, you can say she was a da'iyah, she was a caller. What kinds of hadith did she like to tell the Quraysh about? The kind that they're going to believe in, right? Because this is Meccan period. What kind of hadith is that? Signs of the end of times, Dajjal, prophecies about the future. She understood that there's something in the psyche of these people, that these are the narrations, that these people will affect their hearts. Yes.
Time those people were the idol worshippers?
They were the idol worshippers, yes. But prophecies, the idol worshippers are also, what are they also known for? Superstition. They're known for superstitions, right? So when you talk about something like a future event with description and detail, that's more than superstition. That's like knowledge of something that's going to happen in the future. It's above and beyond what they put their faith in. You can say that she has, alhamdulillah, a wisdom in her da'wah. I know we're at 701. There's many more. This is an amazing book, mashallah, tabarakallah. It's really short. I get nothing for advertising this, by the way. I don't get any like receipts, but I think that when we have a female teacher write something of this nature, like we should support it, inshallah, and benefit from it. Due to iftar being right around the corner, because I want us all to have time to make our own du'as, I will close. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك سعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. And just a reminder, like as we break our fast, to please keep our brothers and sisters in Palestine in our du'as. Also, we have a local brother who's in the hospital facing a heart transplant, our brother Sami Matar. So if we can also keep him in our du'as as we're breaking our fast.